Hey folks, Dave from Nerdarchy, for nerds by nerds, hanging out with this nerd.
Nerdarchist dead.
5th edition Dungeons & Dragons XP, Art or Science. Before we start this video, we want to thank our sponsor, Easy Roller Dice. Whether it's your first set of dice or your 1 millionth set of dice, Easy Roller Dice for all your dice rolling needs. And right now they have a Kickstarter going on for their oversized dice cups. These things are amazing. They hold like 1 million dice. They have great designs on them. You can check that out. There's a link in the description, as well as we have an Easy Roller Dice contest going on. The details will be in the description. Check it out.
All right, so XP Art Science, is the 5th edition system broken? Or, what's going on?
I've always had a bit of a bone of contention with the 5e D&D experience system and the way the encounter building. And me and Nerditor Doug have gone back and forth on this. And finally, he's come around to my way of thinking.
So, there's an article over on nerdarchy.com, and there's a link down in the description below that you can, check it out. We put together, actually, I think it was you did this, put it together. There's an article on it and saying how crazily broken this system is. And here's the perfect evidence for it.
Yeah, so the article is not about that. The article is about, I put together, I built an organization for our world called Order of the Crimson Spiral. And basically, it was founded by a paladin of Stromgarde, or god of war and battle, and basically not niceness.
Right.
So, based off of that article, Nerditor Doug said, hey, do you mind if I put together an encounter that might happen in this region where you can find this order? I'm like, nah, go ahead. So he puts together what he thinks is a really good encounter. He's like, this will be kind of fun and interesting. And he uses a warlord, a war priest, 4 knights, and 6 kangarams. I know what you're going to say now.
What's a kangaram?
What's a kangaram, right? Well, in our product, Fantastical Mounts that Nerdarchy put out, it's over on the Nerdarchy store. You can find it there and pick up a copy if you're interested. But we put together a book full of different mounts that you might find in a fantasy world that aren't in any other of the 5e D&D products that are out there.
So, this group, you've got essentially 12 creatures to deal with. And the maximum is a challenge 12 being your warlord. So the XP system winds up going through the crazy multiplier because you've got 12 creatures. Well, that multiplier is going to hit that challenge 12 monster instead of focusing on the fact that
it's going to hit them all, because you just tally up all the XP. You have a CR 12 or a challenge 12, challenge 9, 4 challenge 3s, and 6 challenge 2s. Right. So I've always looked at the XP system as more art than science, to be honest with you, and I eyeball it. Sometimes this works and sometimes it doesn't. Because if you use a bunch of really weak monsters compared to the party, the budget may be really high because of the multiplier, but your party just wipes through them like it was nothing. It's like area effect spells just decimate their ranks, and they really don't have much effect on the players themselves other than, draining that one resource.
Yeah, you have a high-level party. It doesn't matter how many kobolds you put out there, they are never going to be a threat mechanically. Yes, if you want to apply real world stuff and 400 creatures pile on you, yeah, in real life you might not be able to fend them off, but we don't have that real world mechanics to play with. If you want to come up with a system in your own game and use that kind of stuff, yay, great. But mechanically, with the rules that we have for 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, there is nothing for pile on. And therefore, mechanically, I'm a cleric. I put out my spiritual guardians, and when the kobolds come in to try and kill me, every single one of them is going to die. And all I needed was 1 cleric spell, and poof, they're gone.
Yeah, essentially you become a blender for kobold bits. But yeah, so when Doug put the encounter together, he then went to Kobold Fight Club. They have a calculator over there for encounters. It's actually really convenient. It's really good. You should check it out. I will try and put a link in the description for that as well for convenience. But so we ran the numbers through there. This encounter ended up, by the numbers, by the book, being a beyond deadly encounter for 4 player characters of 20th level. Now, when you went to 5-player characters or 6, it starts balancing out, and at 6 it gets to be like a medium encounter. But we're like, I don't really feel it. Like when I look at this encounter, I started breaking down the numbers. I looked at the ACs, giving the Kangarams plate barding, and everyone else is really wearing plate mail. They all have decent armor class. That's an 18. Then I looked at like the total hit points for each of them. Yeah, our Warlord comes in at over 200 hit points. Our War Priest over 100. They've got a little bit of staying power. The Knights aren't bad at 52 hit points. And then, the Kangarams are at 42 hit points. But that being said, like two
area effect spells.
Yeah, like Fireball, Lightning Ball, Blade
Cone of
Barrier
Cold
is going to put a big hurting on them. So even if you only had one spell, the other players, when they do their attacks, they're dropping something every round for those weaker monsters, or every hit for those weaker monsters fairly consistently. So I'm like, there's no way that bears out at 20th level when you could be like, all right, Meteor Swarm. I mean, even in turn, Jake was like, well, it's not like you're going to catch them all in the same area of effect, easily, unless, of course, you do Meteor Swarm. Then you might get them all.
Meteor Swarm is going to cover a massive area. Like, I've got the template for it, and oh my, it's crazy.
So, yeah, that's like an auto kill on all of those, CR2s and the CR3s, and the other ones is going to hurt too.
You're gonna crush 10 out of your 12 things with one spell. One action of one of those 4 players could destroy most of that encounter while still damaging the others. So I'm sorry that's not gonna pan out. You did the math that if everything hits 231 damage spread out over the 4 characters, that's 57 damage. If you split it out evenly amongst the party, even your wizard is going to survive
at 10th level.
At 10th, yeah.
So to me, like, I look at this encounter and the numbers say beyond deadly for 4 characters of 20th level, and I looked at it like, you know what? This could be a deadly, really hard encounter for a 10th level party, in my opinion. It'd be pushing it a little bit, but like, for beyond 10th level, every level that you add, the survivability of the players come up and the resource string comes up as well. Now, granted, if you're doing multiple encounters in a day, that changes things a lot, and depending on how many encounters. Like if this was the last encounter at the end of the day for your 10th level party, no, they would be decimated. But a 15th level party should be okay. So that's where it really breaks down. And I feel like for 5e D&D, you really need to eyeball it. And I like to just look at it and go, all right, well, how much damage can my weakest player's character take? And then how much damage can these monsters do per attack? Is that going to end the wizard? Or can they take a couple of these shots? Or I look at my spellcasters and think about the spells that they've used in previous encounters. How is this going to interact with this potential encounter? There's some room for some folly there as well, though.
I look at, and I honestly, I love 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, but their XP encounter thing, I don't touch. It's never worked out well for me. I started running 5th edition prior to getting the Dungeon Master's Guide, so I was building encounters for good or for ill prior to getting that builder. And I did one encounter that totally didn't work out well, because like I didn't have that, and it wound up going poorly. But as your characters gain more and more levels, there is more and more room for how high you're gonna use. And I mean, like, okay, your characters are 10th level, well, they could handle a challenge 12, 13, 14 as a solo without a problem, because we don't run multiple encounters every day. We tend to use that nuke factor because we focus our games more on the role playing than on the combat. So when you get into combat, you've got fresh characters, and they're going to go Nova on these NPCs, and therefore you can put more into it. So I looked at this and right, I'm like, this is easily an encounter for 5th or 15th, and you're like, okay, 15th to 10 is kind of that split. So yeah, early on, yeah, you're not going to send a 3rd and 4th or 3 and 4 challenge rating against a 1st level party. It's probably going to destroy them. But as you gain levels, you've got that, that bigger, swing of challenge ratings that you can.
Yeah, I will say too, like, at the higher ends, definitely more art than science. At the lower ends, though, the numbers do bear out, and it's more reliable to use. So as you gain more experience as a dungeon master, I feel like with 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, you're going to want to rely on those charts less and just use it as a loose guide for when you're designing your encounters. And there's so many other variables, like how many encounters are you going to do in a day? Have they been depleting their resources in other ways?
What kind of character builds do you have? Are they built mechanically superior? Where, like, okay, well, I allowed them to roll and they've got better than average stats, and they went totally prime spec, and they're statted to the nines and they're able to get in there? Or did you go unorthodox character builds and you're looking at things that are far more fun, and your sorcerer is a half orc with a 13 charisma and an 18 strength? Like, what are we looking at?
There's actually a 5e D&D gameplay up on the channel. It's from the micro celebrity game. We're still waiting for the celebrities to show up. That I run for our home game, and I ran Maze of Mandoon, which is an adventure over on Nerdarchy.com, and one of the rooms, there's a bunch of Sturges. And I don't know if I remember if I used the number out of the adventure I wrote, or if I upped the number a little bit for the party, because I knew like one of the players was playing a bard.
And got sleep.
And he's got sleep. They're Sturges. They have 2 hit points apiece. And I'm like, he's going to use that, and he's going to wipe out most of them in the first. Yeah, they're just going to fall to the ground and go to sleep. And it's going to be nearly over. He didn't cast any spells. And now all the party has like 3 Sturges attached to them. And so there is the unpredictability of the players. They can make really good choices, which can neutralize your encounters, or they can make really poor choices, which can neutralize themselves, as the case may be. So, like I said, it just seems a little bit more art than science to me.
But there's times that it does completely play out. And I told you I made an encounter prior to getting the Dungeon Master's Guide, and imps were I used 4 imps and 4 orcs, and it was in town. There's all this craziness that went on. I think we only had 4 players in the party at this point in time, and I think they were level 2. Now, if I do the math, this is a well beyond deadly encounter for them. But I didn't have the builder. I'm like, all these things, have very little hit points. We've got, spellcasters.
I know what you're thinking. You're like, I played Dungeons and Dragons. It might have been 3rd edition or advanced Dungeons and Dragons. What's the difference? I mean, 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, it doesn't matter. They're freaking orcs. What are they going to do?
So the combat, starts, like there was a reveal, and all of a sudden, oh God, there's bad guys in town. Your dwarf wizard, he casts a spell and takes the imps out of the question. So they never even got to do anything in combat. Now, I think we wound up finding later that spell doesn't work the way you did it. But needless to say, those imps only took out one of your spells. The orcs, they hit hard though, and they wound up taking the fighter down because they can do a lot of damage, and it's now an even party of adventurers versus orcs, and that player wound up dying. So it definitely was deadly, but part of that wound up being bad dice rolls and poor resource management, because no one in the party had a medicine kit, and the rogue couldn't do a medicine check to save his life.
Yeah, there's
literally
some well, to save that character's life. Yeah, so all that stuff added up to cause that character to die. But that being said, what is your experience with the Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition XP system? Do you think it's right on the money, or do you agree with us it's a little bit wonky? We got a place where you guys can discuss it. That is down in the comments below.
While you're down there, don't forget to check out the link to the Kickstarter and Easy Roller Dice and use that promo code.
So until next time,
stay nerdy.